I met Bernie years and years ago when I used to have a golf tournament down in Bermuda. And Bernie was the highlight of my comedy night. What we lose when we become yours in a real kind of way. We lose our privacy in a really real kind of way. And we give to you. And Bernie, unlike me, I get angry about it sometimes, but Bernie was so open and happy about that. I just couldn't believe the lengths he would go to make you guys comfortable when you came up to him.
I never watch what somebody else does. It does not matter. Bernie Mac got to do a thing. If somebody call you after 9 o'clock, don't let them in.
Yeah.
I need to talk to him in the morning, 8 o'clock, come to the office, because they ain't nothing but a murder there.
When Samuel L. Jackson talks, people listen. He's not the type of guy who sugarcoats or hides behind Hollywood politeness. That's why his comments about Steve Harvey hit so hard, because they weren't whispers in the background. They were out there on national TV for everyone to hear. Jackson openly said he didn't care for Steve Harvey, making it clear that there was no friendship or admiration between them. And that's rare, because most Hollywood figures keep those kinds of opinions behind closed doors. Jackson was extremely close with Bernie Mac, and to him, Steve Harvey wasn't someone who deserved to put himself on Bernie's level. That's where the real friction came from.
Pigs can be charming, Dogs have personalities, but pigs don't.
Samuel L. Jackson and Bernie Mac weren't just co-stars. They were brothers in every sense that mattered. Their bond went back years, long before Hollywood lights and red carpets. Jackson has often spoken about how much Bernie meant to him personally. Take the filming of Soul Men. By that point, Bernie Mac's health was failing. He was dealing with sarcoidosis, the lung disease that ultimately took his life. Most people in that position would have slowed down, but not Bernie. On set, Jackson remembered how Bernie would show up every day, push through the pain, and say, "I'm good, let's go." That wasn't just professionalism. That was Bernie's spirit. He didn't want pity. He didn't want the spotlight on his illness. He wanted to work, to entertain, and to do what he loved. Jackson saw that up close, and it left a permanent mark on him. But their connection went deeper than the movies. Back when Jackson was filming The Negotiator in Chicago, Bernie looked out for him. Bernie even offered Jackson a place to stay, making sure he felt at home. That's not just professional courtesy, that's real friendship. And Jackson never forgot that.
One of the last things he did was a performance, I guess, at some Barack fundraiser, and there was some stink about it. But like Bernie said, it was a joke. If you didn't like it, don't laugh at it. But he was there.
When Jackson talks about Bernie, he doesn't describe him as just another guy he acted with. He uses family language. He called Bernie a sibling, someone he could rely on. That's a rare kind of closeness in an industry where most relationships are surface level. For Jackson, Bernie wasn't just the funny guy from Chicago. He was family. And that loyalty is exactly why Jackson bristled when Harvey started putting himself in the same league as Bernie Mac.
See, the first year, it was just me, Bernie, and Sid. The first night we did it was a disaster, man. It was for me. Mm-hmm. Great for Bernie and Sid, because they went up first.
Right.
Sid went up first. Now, the deal was to do 30 minutes.
Right.
Sid went out there, did 45. Bernie did 52. I don't know if you've ever followed Bernie Mac before. It ain't what you want.
Yeah.
Now let's get to the heart of the conflict. Steve Harvey and Bernie Mac. On the surface, you'd think two comedians from similar backgrounds would respect each other. But behind the scenes, things weren't so smooth. One big issue was Steve Harvey comparing himself to Bernie Mac. It wasn't just casual either. There were times Harvey allegedly measured his own success directly against Bernie's, and that sparked tension. When comedians start stacking themselves up against each other, it often leads to rivalry instead of respect.
Steve Harvey don't deserve to be no king. I don't know how he on the show. He wasn't shit. He on the radio just eating my ass alive. And I'm hearing this going to the airport.
This played out clearly on the original Kings of Comedy tour. The lineup of Steve Harvey, Bernie Mac, Cedric the Entertainer, and D.L. Hewley was legendary. But here's what people don't always talk about. Bernie's sets were so powerful, so explosive, that anyone following him struggled to keep the energy alive. Harvey, who hosted and also performed, often ended up in that spot. And it was tough. Bernie's raw, unfiltered style connected with audiences on a level that scripted comedy just couldn't touch. That made Harvey look weaker by comparison. Cedric the Entertainer even admitted later that Bernie and Harvey didn't always get along, and that tension was strong enough that it blocked any real chance of the kings of comedy doing another reunion tour. Fans wanted it, but behind the scenes, the relationships just weren't strong enough to make it happen. Things really came to a head when Bernie Mac gave that 2003 GQ interview. Bernie accused Steve Harvey of being jealous of him, of trying to sabotage his career. He said Harvey tried to undercut him, and he gave an example that shook a lot of people: the Ocean's 11 role. Bernie claims Steve Harvey actually tried to take that part from him by offering to work for less money. Think about that, going behind someone's back, not because you're the better fit, but because you're willing to undercut just to take the spot. Harvey, of course, denied it later. He said he never tried to sabotage Bernie, but once those accusations were out there, the damage was done. Bernie had spoken his truth, and it painted Harvey in a way that stuck with fans and fellow comedians.
Bernie was a man's man. So when somebody say, they treated Bernie like that was impossible. Bruh, that was impossible. This dude right here was Chicago South Side to his core and blood. You mistreat this dude right here, you know the problem you're gonna have instantly. And he had his boy, the dude they need to interview for Bernie Mac is Chuck Gano.
At the root of it, this wasn't just two comedians having different styles. It was about authenticity versus image. Bernie Mac didn't bend to Hollywood. He didn't soften his edges or try to play nice for the cameras. He gave audiences himself, raw, real, and unfiltered. Harvey, on the other hand, built his career on being polished, marketable, and TV-friendly. That difference created a natural clash. And in a world like Hollywood, where image often matters more than reality, Bernie's authenticity was both his strength and, in some ways, his biggest threat to others in the industry. When Bernie Mac walked onto the Oprah Winfrey Show, the stage dynamics were different from most of her interviews. Oprah was used to being the calm center of the conversation, the one who controlled the tone and gently steered her guests. But Bernie wasn't built to play that game. He came with honesty and the same truth-telling style he used on stage. Oprah wanted to frame comedy as something light, a craft that was more about entertainment than struggle. But Bernie cut through that narrative instantly. He told her straight, comedy is a battlefield. For him, stepping on stage wasn't just telling jokes, it was survival. It was facing an audience that might not be on your side, fighting through the pressure, and still delivering something real.
If you want help, that's not help, that's taken care of. And then when they sit there and they play psychological blackmail with you.
Oprah may be trying to protect her polished view of the industry, tried to downplay that tension, but Bernie didn't let it slide. He clapped back respectfully, reminding her that comedians carry real weight every time they step up. He described the pressure not as fun and games, but as responsibility. Responsibility to make people laugh even when the world outside is heavy, and to do it while carrying his own struggles at the same time. And for one of the rare times, Oprah's composure slipped away. Bernie wasn't trying to embarrass her, but his honesty forced her to acknowledge something raw, something that didn't fit into her smooth talk show format. He humbled her, right there on her own stage, just by refusing to dilute his truth. Then Bernie went even deeper. He opened up about fame in a way that most celebrities would never dare to on national television. He talked about people constantly asking him for money, not small amounts, but $30,000 here, $150,000 there. And he called it what it was, psychological blackmail. It wasn't about generosity. It was about people making him feel guilty, trying to manipulate his success to get what they wanted. He exposed the dark side of fame, the pressure to give, the constant demands, and how heavy that can weigh on someone who came from humble beginnings. This moment showed why figures like Oprah and Steve Harvey were afraid of Bernie. He wasn't dangerous in the literal sense. He was dangerous because he didn't play by their rules of presentation. He forced uncomfortable truths into the spotlight, and in Hollywood, that's something a lot of people can't stand.
I had a guy tell me, Charles, he said, wow, man, They're about to put me out of my house, man. I'm 8 months behind. I said, you should have called me when you was a day behind.
If you really want to understand Bernie Mac, you have to understand his philosophy. He wasn't chasing fame, and he definitely wasn't chasing money. His focus was always on being the best at his craft. For Bernie, comedy wasn't a stepping stone to endorsement deals or corporate recognition. It was an art, and he wanted to master it. Bernie had disdain for comedians or entertainers who were only motivated by money. He made it clear that chasing a paycheck was never his drive. To him, money was a byproduct. What mattered was respect, skill, and being able to stand in front of an audience knowing he had given them something real. This is where the difference with Steve Harvey becomes glaring. While Bernie dismissed money as a motivation, Harvey often leaned into wealth as a marker of success. At one point, Harvey even bragged about his radio earnings around $10 million and brushed it off as a little bit of money. That wasn't Bernie's language. For Bernie, $10 million wasn't the measure of success. The measure was, did you give the audience something unforgettable? Did you tell the truth on stage? Did you make them feel something? This clash of values set Bernie apart. He wasn't trying to build an empire of books, radio shows, or game shows. He wasn't trying to brand himself as a safe, family-friendly TV personality. He was trying to be the best comedian he could be. And that raw focus, art over business, craft over cash, made him stand out. But it also left him vulnerable in an industry where money, polish, and connections often matter more than raw talent. Now let's get into the dark side of Hollywood, the politics, the cliques, and the unspoken rules that decide who rises and who gets left out. This is where Bernie Mac's story starts to take on another layer.
And I know the truth. You think I'm gonna let you shit on Bernie and then come get me? I'm the next king? You. Why? Because the whole time Bernie was here, you was acting like you was funnier than him. The reason you was supposed to go last is because it was your tour. Tell the truth. It was Steve's tour. Not it was gonna be called the Kings of Comedy, it was Steve's tour. These are the guys opening for him. Of course you gotta close if it's your tour. That's why it was such a big deal. But you couldn't do it, because you can't beat the best.
Cat Williams has been one of the loudest voices pointing out how Hollywood operates behind the curtain. According to him, Bernie Mac was invited into those darker circles, the places where real power is exchanged, not on contracts or in front of cameras, but in rooms filled with compromises. And Bernie, true to who he was, refused to play along. He didn't bend, he didn't compromise, and he didn't sign on for things that went against his principles. That refusal is important, because in Hollywood, saying no to those circles doesn't just mean you miss out on opportunities. It can mean you get shut out entirely. Rumors have long circulated about sabotage, about initiation rituals, and about how those who don't go along to get along end up blackballed. For someone like Bernie Mac, who was too authentic to play fake games, that was a real risk. What makes these claims believable is that Bernie's own family and colleagues have echoed the idea that he wasn't in the clique. He wasn't part of the club that protected its own. He was respected by audiences, loved by peers who valued truth, but he wasn't friends with the power brokers who could open every door. This is why figures like Oprah and Harvey, who did play those games to some extent, would have seen Bernie as a threat. He showed you could win crowds and hold respect without bending to Hollywood's unwritten rules. And that scared people. Because if someone like Bernie broke through without playing the game, it exposed the system as unnecessary. And when you refuse to play the game, Hollywood has a way of shutting you out.
Hollywood mourning the loss of comedian and actor Bernie Mac. The 50-year-old funny man died Saturday at a Chicago hospital.
Bernie Mac's passing in August 2008 still doesn't sit right with many people. He had just finished filming Soul Men alongside Samuel L. Jackson, pushing through his illness the way he always did, with grit and determination. He was only 50 years old, and his death was officially linked to complications from pneumonia. On paper, it sounds straightforward, but the details around his final days created a cloud of doubt that has never really lifted. The tragedy began with his struggle against sarcoidosis, a rare lung disease that he had battled for years. Sarcoidosis weakens the lungs, and that makes him more vulnerable to infections like pneumonia. Still, those who were close to him pointed out that Bernie was a fighter. He had managed his illness before, and always pushed through with work, even when his body was exhausted. That's why his sudden decline came as such a shock. The real controversy started when his widow, Rhonda McCullough, filed a wrongful death lawsuit against Bernie's doctor. The suit claimed that the doctor delayed giving him the proper treatment when he needed it most, and he failed to call 911 when Bernie's condition became critical. According to the reports, there was a window where immediate emergency care might have saved his life, but instead, those crucial minutes were lost. When news of that lawsuit came out, it added fuel to already burning suspicions. Fans and even some fellow entertainers started asking whether Bernie's death was simply a tragic medical failure, or if there was something bigger at play. Some tied it into a troubling history of Black entertainers who refused to compromise, and who ended up silenced.
It was like, ooh, nothing I had ever seen. And I saw him and he was just shaking. And I remember going to him and I said, oh God, I said, Bernard, please don't die. I said, please don't die. I said, I'm gonna take care of you. If you just come back, I can take care of you. Don't leave us now. This has been my life since I was 16.
It wasn't that Bernie was paranoid or outspoken about conspiracies, but he was outspoken about Hollywood's games, about the pressure of fame, about the exploitation that came with success. He didn't shy away from naming the truth, even if it made powerful people uncomfortable. So when his death came suddenly, right at the height of his career, the timing raised questions. Fans pointed to other artists and comedians who challenged the system, only to be cut down early. Theories circulated about whether there was more to Bernie's passing than just pneumonia. Or was he another voice silenced because he refused to play along? Now, whether you believe in those conspiracies or not, one thing is obvious. The negligence claims and the timing of his death only increased those suspicions. For many, it wasn't just that Bernie Mac died. It was how he and how preventable it might have been that left an open wound.
So it was mostly just surprise when I heard, even when he was in the hospital. And I said, is he okay? And they go, yeah, they think he's okay. And 3 days later, they're like, oh, I said, is he out of the hospital? They said, no, he should be there a few more days. And then 2-3 days later, he was gone. So it was just a shock.
Looking back, Bernie Mac's career wasn't defined by fear. He didn't live his life trying to avoid stepping on toes. And he didn't water down his comedy to make Hollywood comfortable. Instead, his career was defined by the fear he created in others, the fear he put in people who thrived on control, on image, and on keeping things safe. That's the irony. Bernie Mac was never trying to be dangerous. He was just trying to be himself. But in a world where so much is built on compromise, that authenticity became his greatest weapon. And for some, it became a reason to shut him out. So here's the question for you guys. Do y'all think Bernie Mac was shut out because he refused to play by Hollywood's rules? Or was it simply jealousy from the people around him who couldn't match his realness? Leave your thoughts in the comments. If you've been enjoying this breakdown of untold Hollywood stories, make sure to subscribe for more.